revelation.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast. It is February 4th, Wednesday. Thanks for joining me today. Big news coming up. AI has leaped another hurdle, this time rattling software markets and also data analysis markets. It appears that Anthropic AI has started writing sophisticated code, upending markets and software makers like Adobe. And this is changing the whole landscape, that AI now can obviously accomplish very sophisticated tasks at speeds that obviously humans can't compete with. So this is also important because once we get into humanoid robotics, that AI can complete sophisticated tasks is also very important. So, and also what we're going to get into today is what's going on with what's happening in the U.S., the New World Order agenda, and how the U.S. is being split apart now by the divisive catalyst of ICE raids. That federal law enforcement is enforcing immigration law, and apparently Democrats have problems with that. They also have problems with people showing ID to vote and proving you're a citizen to register, because it's going to upend any chance they have of getting reelected. So these stories and more are coming up right now. Let's read the news. All right, we're going to start out with the lead story here from the Wall Street Journal. Threat of new AI tools wipes $30 billion off software and data stocks. From LegalZoom and Expedia to RS and Apollo, shares of companies that sell or invest in stocks fell sharply on Tuesday. They keep throwing LegalZoom in there, and I don't really get where they're coming. It's data analysis, so LegalZoom is, I guess, is at the forefront of data analysis. But that's not nearly as important as writing sophisticated software like what is involved in Adobe's Photoshop and other editing software like Premiere. The story goes on to say, if things are advancing as rapidly as we hear from OpenAI and Anthropic, it's going to be a problem. Investors are starting to go after any of the companies that could be disrupted, which is all kinds of software application names. There it is. This is a quote from Art Hogan, Chief Market Strategist at B. Riley Wealth Management. So things are advancing with AI very rapidly. Writing this kind of sophisticated code is, well, it's sort of a watershed moment in terms of AI. We'll see what happens. Going back to the story, though, investors fear that new developments in artificial intelligence will supplant software, reverberated through the stock market Tuesday, dragging down the shares of companies that develop, license, and even invest in code and systems. Traders have questioned whether AI will chip away at the competitive moat built by software makers like Adobe and Salesforce, even since generative AI models hit the market several years ago. Like I said, it's turning a corner here, and the thing is with all technological progression is it snowballs, and people aren't really aware or aren't really sure of what the repercussions may be. There's more to this story, though. While other AI models and tools have similar capabilities, millions of people are now discovering and using them to write software, do a data analysis, and complete other tasks. As I said before, AI is supplanting all human endeavor, not just jobs, but other things that people might like to do even in their spare time. The key is going to be humanoid robotics, which is going to make a splash in the next 6 months or so. You'll see. Even Elon Musk was talking about humanoid robots being in the home within a year. The other big story here is, well, let's just put this in plain English. If the Trump administration is cut at the knees now, soon, at the midterms, pretty much limiting its capabilities, the administration's capabilities, the conservative movement, conservative populist movement's capabilities to stall or withstand the onslaught of the globalist revolutionary agenda, we're going to have big problems. If we conservatives, Republicans don't win the midterms, we're going to be in trouble. We're going to be in trouble at the end of the Trump term regardless, but we would hope to hasten that effect coming up in the next, couple of years, few years. That way we could continue with the immigration enforcement, renew the sovereignty of not just the United States, freedom, liberty, but also the sovereignty of the individual and their freedom and liberty, etc. All right, let's move on. Next headline here. Federalist: Schumer threatens to shut down government so Republicans can't stop non-citizens from voting. Senator Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, threatened Monday to shut down the government unless Republicans drop their efforts to secure elections and keep non-citizens from voting. Schumer said in a post on X, "The SAVE Act is nothing more than Jim Crow 2.0. It would disenfranchise millions of Americans. Every single Senate Democrat will vote against any bill that contains it. Speaker Johnson should tell SAVE Act Republicans to stand down, or else the shutdown will be on them." It really won't be on them. And the reason in being is it's the Democrats. And many people in the electorate, many U.S. citizens believe that everybody should be able to identify themselves when they turn out for the polls. Period. Going back to the SAVE Act's original idea, which was to register, you need to prove citizenship. That's also very important, but I think it's more important that people turn out to the poll and have to identify themselves as a registered voter. I think that's extremely important. Before we move on here to the rest of this story from the Federalist, I just want to thank you for joining me today and encourage you to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, and particularly share this episode. I want to try to get the word out that this program, this podcast, where I cover the most headlines, the most news, and give analysis of pretty much any other show on TV or the internet or anywhere. And it's important because you need to be able to form your opinions, your point of view based on context. And so what I try to provide here is the largest amount of context that you could possibly digest in 1 hour. I just forgot to do one thing. I was late getting ready today. So let's get back to the news and this Federalist article. The Safeguarding American Voter Eligibility Act, the SAVE Act, would amend the 1993 National Voter Registration Act to require documentary proof of citizenship to register to vote in federal elections. I believe that's very, very important. And the reasoning being there is because illegal aliens are given driver's license, so a simple driver's license isn't enough. I'm not saying that non-citizens shouldn't be given driver's license, but maybe if they're given driver's license, it should indicate whether or not they're a citizen. This overlooking whether people are citizens or not is an issue, and specifically because the Democrats are trying to conflate the issue. They constantly talk about immigrants, but they don't delineate between legal immigrants and illegal immigrants. And legal immigrants have a big problem with that because they went through the proper process. They did it legally, which means, for the most part, is that you're ethically predisposed to do things the right way, which makes for a better resident of the United States. And also, they don't think it's fair for people to jump the line. And in the case of the Joe Biden administration, tens of millions are jumping the line in front of people that are waiting lawfully. The last bit here says, while non-citizen voting is already illegal, as Maggie Brennan often says, current federal law is largely toothless. This is the problem with when you go on and face the nation, and Maggie Brennan goes, legal people that are here illegally, non-citizens voting is already a law in federal elections. But that doesn't mean anything because it's not enforced. Nobody is ever asked when they go to show up at the polls if you're here legally. Next up, we got Nicki Minaj, post-millennial. 83% of Americans agree with Nicki Minaj. Elections need voter ID. Minaj wrote, what sensible, forward-thinking, cutting-edge leading nation is having a debate on whether or not there should be voter ID? And she's right, because most Western nations have voter ID. She wrote in an ex post, or I should say, she continued in an ex post, like, they're actually fighting not to have people present ID while voting for your leaders. Do you get it? Do you get it now? And what she's referring to is it's the effort of the Democratic Party to use illegal voting, illegal immigrant voting, among others, I mean, dead people on the voter rolls, whatever, with the mail-in ballot scheme as a way to cheat the elections. And if you believe in democracy, they constantly say, oh, Trump is a threat to democracy. He's not really, for the simple reason is that the Democrats, like their name certainly doesn't suggest, if you're a Democrat, you believe in democracy, but the plan of mail-out ballots, mail-in ballots, not cleaning up the voter rolls is an affront to democracy. So if you really believe in democracy, you'd want the SAVE Act, right? You'd want to audit your voter rolls every year. You'd want not to allow non-citizens to vote or prohibit non-citizens to vote. So you're using this, this isn't the hedge issue. The hedge issue, or I should say the wedge issue. The wedge issue is ICE enforcement. And I said it every day, and I'm going to say it again. ICE operations are legitimate. So any obstruction of further duties, you like them or not, is un-American. You want to fight either the supremacy clause or you want to fight law enforcement while they're conducting legitimate operations. It's your right, certainly your right to protest. But I think everybody that's obstructing or conspiracy to obstruct is what all these ICE Watch apps are, along with the politicians engage in a conspiracy to obstruct federal law enforcement. Now, with a similar analogy, if you said the FBI is investigating, let's say, the Cronenberg case, where Cronenberg went into an Idaho college and killed, I think it was 4 co-eds, stabbed them to death brutally. Now, if the FBI is investigating that case and I showed up there and started interfering and not allowing the FBI to go and take fingerprints and do evidence analysis or collect evidence or whatever, or even obstruct the FBI when they went to apprehend Brian Cronenberg, people would go, what the fuck are you doing? This is the same thing. That is the analogy. But the reasoning being is that enforcing immigration is striking at the heart of what Chuck Schumer is so upset at, which is having illegals vote will undermine the ability of the Democrats to get elected. And the Democrats are on the wrong side. They're on the side of the communist Chinese, of the authoritarian Europeans that want this so-called New World Order, which is basically has to uproot and dispose of individual liberties and freedoms, which everybody enjoys, but they just can't put it all together. Okay. Post-millennial, Colorado police officer fired after advocating for shooting of ICE agents. According to the Department of Homeland Security and DHS, deadly threats against ICE officers have increased by 8,000%, and now coming from basically one of their own law enforcement folks. Colorado police officer has been fired after advocating for U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents to be shot in the head. The Erie Police Department announced on Tuesday Officer Hailey Hazel Shimko was terminated by the chief of police following an internal investigation. That's weird. I thought I had more on this. Oh, I have the quote here. I thought I had the X. Oh, it's a Facebook. I thought I had the Facebook quote here, but it did say they wear armor so headshots would work better. I think it should also be put in jail because it makes it a credible threat. You see, if you've ever been investigated by police, if you ever say, hey, I want to shoot somebody, and they show up or investigate you, and you don't have access to firearms, they'll go, well, that's considered an empty threat. But if you do have firearms, you might be arrested and you might have your firearms confiscated. Now, this guy's a police officer, so he obviously has access to firearms, which means it's not an empty threat. National Review has the headline, anti-ICE agitators ironically and illegally blockade Minnesota streets. Story goes on to say, anti-ICE agitators are creating roadblocks in Minnesota and stopping cars that have out-of-state license plates. According to videos posted online that documents the protest, the purpose of the roadblocks is for protesters, agitators, really, to demand identification from drivers to confirm that they are not linked to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Just like Chaz or CHOP or whatever they call that autonomous region in Portland, this is illicit behavior. They have no right to block, detain, or otherwise harass residents, citizens, whomever. These people should be arrested, but they're all masked. And we've seen an uptick in this sort of vigilante violence and harassment. The problem is, obviously, in Minnesota and other blue states, is the local police department isn't enforcing the law and allowing these vigilantes to roam the streets. The same thing if you have a protest and you have a parade or a march or something, and you're not permitted to take over the street for your march, That's also an illegal protest. Just a reminder, I got a sinus infection, so you got to excuse me just a bit, but I got to take time to breathe. Moving on to the next article, article number 6. Just the News anti-ICE activist groups receive over $3 million in funding from Soros-backed charity. Now you see why these protesters and agitators can spend all day in the street, because they're getting money from these groups. This money is funneled to nonprofits, which then disperse the funds mostly to local leaders, who then lead the ne'er-do-wells who don't have jobs to carry out this activity. Multiple anti-ICE activist groups in Minnesota have collectively received more than $3 million from a philanthropy group backed by leftist billionaire donor George Soros. According to his tax filings, the Minneapolis-based Headwaters Foundation of Justice awarded at least $3.3 million in grants to at least 16 groups since 2014 that now seek to monitor federal agents or protest immigration and customs enforcement activity. The activist group Centro de Trabajadores Unidos and de Lucha received the highest donation of over $1 million, while Minnesota Immigrant Rights Action Committee received the lowest donation. Records show Jewish Community Action also received $182,000 from Headwaters. Council on American Islamic Relations, that's CARE, Minnesota received $140,000. Unidos Minnesota has received $90,000, and Greater Minnesota Worker Center has received $385,000 from the foundation. Now, this is another foundation, Headwaters, I wasn't aware of. He's got a lot of different groups, and then these groups are umbrella groups that then fund other NGOs, et cetera, and then those NGOs run other smaller groups, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you're saying since 2014, so that's over a 10-year period, so let's not get our panties in a bunch over the funding here, but what we do understand is that there is money going to these groups that are fomenting unrest, that are coming from leftists, avowed leftists like Soros. But also lately we've been talking about that guy Singham and his alliance with the communist Chinese, and there are many other people that have alliances to groups that are adversarial to the United States. Fox News 21-year-old Minnesota church attendee reveals leftist agitators still harassing faithful in a spiritual battle. Caleb Phillips said an agitator with a megaphone has been berating congregants, including his aging girlfriend, when they come in and out of the church. Now, this kind of protest is, as far as I'm concerned, legitimate. I don't agree with it. At a certain point, it becomes harassment. But like I said, standing on the street corner with a megaphone and a sign is legitimate protest. Blocking streets, firing fireworks, spitting or otherwise impeding law enforcement, not just federal, any law enforcement is illegal. And you're certainly not going to get people on your side if you're blocking streets when they're trying to get to work and so forth and so on. Now, I've been talking about this next story. This is story number 8 for some time. People weren't listening to me because they're like, what does he know? The point is that ICE began arresting protesters and agitators, activists, but they have nowhere to put them because the local police isn't going to incarcerate them for ICE. So they don't have the facilities, and they can't cart them all the way back to Washington or put them on a plane for Guantanamo or what have you. So they have to build or build out, convert spaces to house the arresting of agitators. But Trump is also expanding, as AP puts it, $45 billion expansion of immigrant detention sites faces pushback from communities, but it's not just for the immigrants. Trump administration attempts to house thousands of detained immigrants in jails, converted warehouses, and privately run facilities in their communities. Federal officials have been scouting cities and counties across the U.S. for places to hold immigrants as they roll out massive $45 billion expansion of detention facilities financed by President Donald Trump's recent tax-cutting law. And like I said, and of course, the Associated Press doesn't put it in their story, these facilities will also house people the feds arrest for agitating and obstruction. All right, so there's some problems going on in Virginia ever since this new person, the CIA officer, was elected there as governor. And they're turning up the heat for another catalyst here in Virginia. And this might be the foretelling of a false flag. The story from Fox News says major public school board simulates parent terrorist attack after fatal accident kills a student. The parental terror attack training session came just hours after Loudoun County high school student was killed in an accident involving an employee. I think it's unrelated. Nick Minock, a reporter for Washington, D.C. area outlet NBC7, posted on X that the controversial Virginia school board hired 30 actors to portray Loudoun County parents in a mock terror attack scenario. Fuck. Now, this is the same school district that had that Democrats labeled, and at the time, the Attorney General, Mayorkas, what was the other guy? In any case, labeled parents in a Loudoun County school district that were upset after a transgender student raped another student in the girl's bathroom, and they didn't even announce or investigate the crime. And parents at that school board meeting erupted, obviously angrily erupted. And what happened? Not much happened. So they're doubling down in the same district. And if you look at a map, you can see Loudoun County is very close to Washington, D.C. So there's an issue there where Loudoun is, where Langley is, and where D.C. is. And this is the reason. They need to have like-minded policies in place where they want control. Okay. Going back to the story. Minock wrote that the actors filled the seats like parents normally do during school board meetings, but then broke out into a frenzy of screaming, running, and yelling. One parent in the scenario is supposed to have a gun. Staff were instructed to run, hide, and fight. Another catalyst, another turning up the temperature of divisive politics. And who runs the schools? The taxpayer, the parents. Not the administrators. And that's what the Democrats like to do, liberals like to do. They like to get in places of power and entrench themselves and refuse to be removed, a lot of times illicitly. I belong to a condo board, and same things happens. These liberal women, they don't want to follow the law. They don't want to follow protocol and policy and the bylaws or whatever. And they want to sideline you when you're trying to change policy. A lot of times being represented by the owners themselves, what the owners want, they don't want to do that. In any case, that's a side issue. I don't want to digress. Article number 10 from the Post-Millennial. Investigator in Charlie Kirk murder case reveals additional engraved casings were found at Tyler Robinson's home. You're guilty. DNA found on the screwdriver matches the suspect. You're guilty. The evidence that were obtained did provide us with the DNA evidence in relation to items used during the commission of the crime and then were compared to Mr. Robinson. Agent Dave Hall with the Utah State Bureau of Investigation was called to the stand in the courtroom of Judge Tony Graff on Tuesday. Hall took the stand and was first questioned by the prosecutors before being examined by Catherine Nestor, who is the defendant's attorney. Prosecutors asked Hall to describe the scene where Kirk was killed on Utah Valley Campus University on September 10th, 10th, 2025, about the evidence he collected in the case. And he just said all the evidence points to Tyler Robinson. He's guilty. See, the issue is first-time criminals always make mistakes. They're nervous. They don't police what they're doing. Hence the screwdriver. And also, he ditched the rifle in the woods. And then when he went back to get it, the place was swarming with law enforcement. So it seems it was previously reported that the rifle belonged to his grandfather. That's all we need to know, and then case closed. All right, more about conspiracy. Just the news, Illinois becomes second state to join WHO's Global Disease Network after withdrawal by the U.S. Illinois Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker announced Tuesday that Illinois is now the second state to join the World Health Organization Global Disease Network, despite Trump administration's completely withdrawing from the U.S. From the WHO. The WHO, if you didn't know, is controlled by the Communist Chinese. Why the fuck would democratic states, we know why, join the WHO in rebuke of the federal government, which handles foreign policy? The World Health Organization is foreign policy. It's the same reason why, we love Dr. Fauci. And despite all the evidence of what the fuck's going on, that Dr. Evil there, all of a sudden, he's loved by certain people. There's this bifurcation of people that don't want to follow the facts, don't want to follow the truth, and they're all postmodernists, want to believe in their own subjective thinking, their truth, and their tribe's truth about what's going on. We knew way from the beginning that COVID was built here in this country, somehow got to the Communist Chinese, where supposedly it leaked. We'll get to that another time. The move comes after California Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom said his state will be part of the WHO's Global Outbreak Alert and Response Network, which is tasked with rapidly detecting and responding to emergent public health threats. And then the WHO tells sovereign nations what to do. The problem with the WHO agreement originally was the fact that it asks states to give up their sovereignty and give all authority to the WHO, which is run by the Chinese, which is basically a soft takeover. And we know there's going to be another release soon. There was that thing in Las Vegas where the guy that was busted in California with a Chinese communist biolab, illicit biolab, was uncovered in California, and they went and investigated another property this guy had in Las Vegas. For all those people that think Trump is a fascist, a corporate fascist, that's the only type of fascism that exists today, is corporate fascism. I don't want to go back down into what fascist means. It doesn't just mean authoritarianism, although fascists are authoritarian. Fascism has a lot of other prerequisites to call it fascism. In any case, real clear politics, there will be consequences. Trump White House warns defense contractors. Well, why would he do that? President Trump sent the stocks of the military-industrial complex stumbling when he complained that defense contractors were paying dividends too generously, buying back their own stock too aggressively, and compensating executives too lavishly. While the president loves a booming market, Trump has grown frustrated with prime defense contractors, heavyweight companies with direct Pentagon contracts, and Fortune 500 valuations rewarding shareholders rather than reinvesting profits into their manufacturing capacity that the United States needs and the Pentagon requests, even as they fall behind in the delivery of weapons and systems. They're not doing their job. He's not a fascist. He took on the pharmaceutical companies. He took on the banks, taking on military-industrial complex. Come on. Soon we'll be taking on chemical manufacturers. I'll get to that at the end. Article number 13, just the news. Mamdani mystique melts while NYC freezes. At least 13 die of hypothermia on the streets. If you didn't hear about this story, Mamdani is flailing. He was hit with a big winter storm. He didn't reallocate assets where they needed to be. Streets went unplowed. Garbage isn't being picked up. And supposedly a socialist cares about everybody, allowed 13 homeless people to die. That's on his head. Buck stops at the top. Number 14, One American News, Democrat Representative Christian Menefee sworn in to fill late Representative Turner's House seat after winning Texas special runoff election. Now, the 18th congressional district, reliably Democratic region, Democrats have won and have supported presidential candidates since the 1970s. Obviously, it limits the House majority of the Republicans, but many people are saying because it was a special election, people didn't turn out. And they said at the midterms, when this seat will be up for re-election again, that this guy will be voted out. We'll see. It's not a sign of the times. The problem is we have to win hearts and minds out there. You have to understand that you're either with what's happening in 2030, which is the beginning of an agenda, a neo-feudalist agenda that is going to rock the world. And you're not going to be happy unless you're a multi-millionaire or billionaire. I'm telling you. So go ahead and vote with the Democrats if you want. You're going to end up in bad shape. The only pushback is conservative populism against this, just so you know. And I don't agree with Trump on everything, and I'm not going to digress into that right now, but Democrats are friggin' ruthless liars, killers, thieves. But they put a smiley face and they go, we want to help you. The best way to help people is to leave them alone, for the most part. In any case, New York Post, Jill Biden's ex-husband charged with first-degree murder of new wife. And this confused me at first. Jill Biden's ex-husband was arrested Monday on charges he murdered his wife in their Delaware home in December. Bill Stevenson, who was previously married to the former First Lady, had been hit with first-degree murder in an indictment for allegedly killing his new spouse, Linda Stevenson. What I didn't understand was they kept saying new wife, new wife. I thought they were newly married, but apparently they've been married for decades. But he murdered her after a domestic dispute. There's no moral tether here. Nobody cares about how you should treat your fellow human being. And that's the great thing about Christian ethic. Are you your brother's keeper? Like him or not. I don't necessarily like my brother. I guess I love him. Doesn't matter. You still got to shepherd people. If you're in a position to do so, in any case. Federalist. Trump's triumphal arc is an important rebellion against postmodern thought. And I loved this headline because I like rebellion against postmodern thought. I think that's one of my favorites. But I just briefly into it, it's about his arc to triumph, so to speak. The greatness of neoclassical art and architecture lies not merely in historical memory, but in truth. And that's why modernists hate it. And I wanted to get into this because yesterday I talked a little bit about Emerson and the relationship, the philosophical relationship he had with religion, religious nature as religion and the soul and its connection to the soul. And this is where neoclassical art comes in. I'll just briefly read here. Classical and neoclassical architecture are grounded in the human body itself. Listen to that for a second. Proportion, symmetry, hierarchy derived from the embodied reality. Columns echo limbs, facades mirror torsos, and sculptural figures such as Atlantes and caryatids, quite literally bear weight. These figures are not ornamental flourishes. They are dramatized. A moral claim. Dignity is not found in weightlessness or self-creation, but in strength, order toward form. Burden accepted rather than denied. What does that mean? It just means the beauty of the human form, of God's creation, is mirrored in what we do, or it should be. When the opposite is true, it's adversarial or satanic. I don't mean satanic like devil horns. Satanic as in Satan, adversary, to what is true and beautiful and natural. Used to be all the liberals and leftists were all into nature. Nature's so beautiful and everything. And now they want to take a barbaric hand against nature. It's very strange. The Associated Press, article number 17, Maha has reshaped healthy policy. Now it's working on environmental rules. EPA Director Lee Zeldin did something out of character for Environmental Protection Agency leader who has been hacking away at regulations intended to protect Americans' air and water. And this has to do with the AP's stance and deregulation against pollution, so-called pollution safeguards, right? Pollution safeguards, which is not necessarily true. The EPA is removing regulations that may be burdensome, but they're going to have to reconcile with the other parts of the administration, which are Maha. And Maha is going to benefit, Make America Healthy Again is going to benefit the Republicans in the midterms. Because everybody wants to be healthy, right? No, I don't know. I don't like pollution, right? But that's not connected to climate change. I'm not going to digress into that argument right now. Let's just get back to the article. He announced new restriction on 5 chemicals commonly used in building materials, plastic products, and adhesives. And he cheered it as a Maha win. So I don't know how the AP sort of cast Lee Zeldin in a bad light when he says he's putting new restrictions on 5 chemicals. But I thought he was deregulating. What's your point? Well, the point goes on to say it was one of many signs of a fragile collaboration. See, they used the descriptor, the adjective fragile. Who says it's fragile? They do. That has been building between Republican administration traditionally supportive of big business, Republican administrations traditionally supportive of big business. That's my problem. Trump just went at the defense contractors. How do they say a Republican administration traditionally supportive of big business? In some cases, maybe as far as tax laws go. But he went after the banks for their usury. He went after pharmaceutical company for their monopolies. Went after defense contractors for their delays and self-dealing. But yeah, he's a fascist. In any case, article goes on to say, Make America Healthy Again movement, which he put into place, which argues that corporate environmental harms are putting people's health in danger. Of course they are. The unlike pairing grew out of the coalition's success influencing public health policy with the help of its biggest champion, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. As health secretary. He pared back vaccine recommendations and shifted the government's position on topics like seed oil, fluoride, and Tylenol. Wait a second here. If he's a corporate fascist and he's in a Republican administration traditionally supportive of big business, why would he pare back vaccine recommendations if it's going to hurt the pharmaceutical industry? They contradict themselves in their fucking story. Anyway, they go on to say, EPA's promise to release a MAHA agenda is in the coming months. At stake is the strength of President Donald Trump's coalition as November's midterm elections threaten his party's control of Congress. After politically diverse of MAHA devotees came together to help Trump return to the White House little more than 1 year ago, disappointing them could mean losing the support of a vocal voting bloc. They're not going to disappoint them. They're going to double down. Everything the Trump administration is doing is to help Americans. But it's not reported as such. It's always like, oh, you're hurting Americans by not forcing them to take vaccines. There's more. Zeldin joined a call in December with the advocacy group MAHA Action, where he invited activists to participate in developing the EPA's MAHA agenda. Since then, EPA staffers had regularly appeared on the weekly calls and promoted what they say are open door policies. Doesn't sound like a fragile coalition to me. Oh, the AP sucks. They're all the major news agencies are compromised for the most part. Even Reuters. Buoyed by Kennedy's success, MAHA Group takes aim at state vaccine laws. U.S. activists allied with Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. hope to ban vaccine mandates in as many as a dozen states this year, building on the law they conceived and passed in Idaho, according to interviews with 3 working on the effort. Kennedy, a longtime anti-vaccine activist. All right, hold on right there. We know Kennedy bases his conclusions on data. So the Reuters MI6, again, tries to malign Kennedy by calling him an anti-vaccine activist, which he isn't. He said many, many times before, he goes, I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm anti-vaccine ingredients that could cause harm. Not anti-vaccine. Because the science actually of inoculation works. Goes on to say, last year we made the government's vaccine advisory committee, replacing independent experts. Independent experts. Yeah, okay. You mean experts aligned with the pharmaceutical industry, with many appointees who are aligned with MAHA agenda and share his anti-vaccine views. Again, he doesn't have anti-vaccine views. He has anti-pharmaceutical views because the pharmaceutical companies push things that are not necessarily completely safe, or they lie about the safety and efficacy of these medicines. The Medical Freedom Act Coalition, which combines 14 MAHA-aligned organizations, launched in January and aims to advance the agenda by taking on state vaccine mandates they say are government overreach, leaders of 3 coalition groups told Reuters. They are. We live in a free country. You shouldn't be forced to take medicines that haven't been completely vetted and that are sold as safe and effective, and a lot of times aren't, or sometimes the black box warnings or side effects aren't overly announced, aren't announced publicly, or aren't stressed. All right, got a couple minutes left here, so let's get into story 19. We got about a little over 20 articles, and it's still taking me about an hour. I want to try to lessen the analysis and give you the headlines. Try to stick my analysis to a sentence or two. All right. New York Post teen Epstein accuser wrote she was used as a human incubator for a secret baby who was snatched at birth. They said the baby died. The newborn was apparently snatched at birth. The claim, which was included in the latest Epstein document dump, was laid bare in a diary entry describing how the team gave birth to a little girl around 2002 when she was just 16 or 17 years old, when it's still statutory rape. How did she get pregnant? I'm beyond broken, she wrote. Elsewhere, she described how Epstein had wanted to create a superior gene pool and perfect offspring and missed the person I was before I made into what feels like a human. I was made into what feels like a human incubator. Superior gene pool. Why me? It makes no sense. Why my hair color and eye color that feels very Nazi-like? Who's the Nazi now? You should check out episode 154 of Tuesdays with Perry. Perry and I went live last night and discussed Epstein, all the things that had come out in the Epstein file so far, including the use of Goyim, the racist remarks referring to the Goyim, referring to black peoples as the N-word, and talks about being superior to Gentiles and others, and talking about only wanting to deal with superior Jews and the like, particularly in business, and so forth and so on. And you might have noticed that Epstein didn't recruit any young black girls. They were all mostly white. So, I mean, who's the racist? Right? Who's engaged in eugenics? Because, abortion is a form of eugenics, but I'm going to get into that. Story goes on to say in 2019, the New York Times reported that Epstein had informed scientists he wanted to improve humanity by using his sperm to impregnate scores of women at his New Mexico ranch, which obviously he was doing. Two award-winning scientists told the outlet that the financier had shared his plans for a baby-making factory in the desert on multiple occasions starting in the early 2000s. The Women's Diary entry briefly noted the possibility of moving to New Mexico. She wrote, "Controlled all by Jeffrey all the time. Get away from it all. And go to New Mexico? What in the hell? This makes no sense. What about school?" She went on to write. Crazy. More about Epstein, though. We got a couple minutes left. Fox News. Story number 20. Ex-Prince Andrew entangled in Epstein's House of Horrors triggers new nightmare for Prince William. Newly released images show the disgraced former Duke of York on all fours above an unidentified woman. Girl. Let's look at the pictures. Excuse me. There's Jeffrey Epstein. And what looks like surveillance footage, because it's black and white. Now look at that girl. Now it blocks out her face. Now is this Virginia Giuffre? I don't know. But look at that girl. Look at the narrowness of the hips, skinniness of the legs, and the small breasts. Look at her, the size of her. That is a young girl, 15, 16 years old. Disgusting. Oh. I mean, you make your own comments about, I think young women, teenage girls, I think are beautiful. I'm not going to say they're not, but in this context, not good. Not good for the Prince of Wales or whatever, or however he's considered. He's not considered anything anymore. So in any case, some things that go along with this report. He showed up at police. He showed up. He turned himself in to police, was there for some while. Is out of police custody now, but has been banished from royal residence. There's more about the UK implication here. Associated Press, UK police open a criminal investigation into politician Peter Mandelson over alleged leaks to Jeffrey Epstein. Of course there were leaks. Because once you start, diddling young girls, I want to say girls, children by law, then you're forced to, give up. You're blackmailed, forced to give up sensitive information. British police on Tuesday opened a criminal investigation into politician Peter Mandelson over alleged misconduct in public office related to his relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. So, newly released Epstein files suggest Mandelson, a former cabinet member and cabinet minister, ambassador, and elder statesman of the governing Labor Party, that's liberal, may have shared market-sensitive information with convicted sex offender a decade and a half ago. So there you go. You put somebody in a compromised situation, you threaten to out him for having sex with underage girls, and then you say, well, you got to give up your insider information. Blackmail is used for all sorts of different things. Okay, a couple of minutes left. What do we got here? One American News. U.S. forces intercept Iranian drone and protect tanker in Arabian Sea. Tensions escalated. U.S. Central Command, a Navy fighter shot down an Iranian drone targeting an aircraft carrier, while a destroyer intervened to protect a U.S. flagged tanker in the Straits of Hormuz. This is the USS Abraham Lincoln. Destroyed a drone, a Shahad 139 drone. Later that day, USS McFall and U.S. aircraft rushed to assist the Stena Imperative, U.S. flag crewed tanker. U.S. flag and crewed tanker. The vessel was transiting the U.S. Strait of Hormuz when it was swarmed by a Moharher drone and two Iranian Revolutionary Guard boats. This is connected with the next story here. Zero Hedge, second Iranian diplomat in Europe, defects, seeks asylum amid U.S. pressure. The Iran's charge d'affaires in Vienna, Ghalam Mirza Durkovan, abruptly abandoned his post and is reportedly seeking asylum in Switzerland for him and his family. That's asylum. When you're a diplomat or a government employee of another country and you want to leave without being targeted, you seek asylum. It's not just for you're fleeing the economic conditions in your country and you want to go to the U.S., which are many states away, thousands of miles away, and then you declare asylum. Just the news. Chinese students with CCP membership, military links infiltrate U.S. universities. We know this. Conservative nonprofit oversight group, the American Accountability Foundation, found nearly 24 Chinese academics working at elite U.S. schools and labs, which is important, who, because the dual-use threat of their research, close ties to the military research sector in China, or clear ties to the Communist Party, should be expelled from the United States. Of course they should. The research document, Chinese Scientific Infiltration Threat Assessments, said the Chinese students working at some of America's top colleges, often receiving U.S. federal funding. Some of it tied from the Pentagon to conduct research into advanced technologies, have troubling backgrounds which could pose a risk to U.S. national security. We opened the friggin' back door to the Chinese. Come on in. Look at all our research. Matter of fact, help us develop the research. It is a conspiracy to give up the sovereignty of the United States, the security of the United States, and the codification of freedom and liberties to a new world order that's going to be run by the Chinese. For most people, the neo-feudalistic aspect is going to be dictated by the Chinese through a technocracy, and there'll be a strata of corporations still dealing in capitalist free market, so to speak, but you'll never see that for the most part. But they'll be running the communists, as they often do. Communism, socialism is not a bulwark against capitalism. It's the capitalists that invented socialism as controlled opposition to their plans. Figure it out. Non-public documents show global scope of European censorship apparatus. This is from Just the News. According to a GOP probe. Irish comedian who was arrested in London after criticizing gender ideology when visiting in the U.S. When he got back, he was arrested. Non-public documents given to the committee by companies under subpoena show more than 100 closed-door meetings between the European Union's executive arm, you know who that is, Van der Leyen, and tech platforms since at least 2020, the year before the Biden administration started its spree of pressuring platforms to censor supposed disinformation. Fuckers. The EC's supposedly voluntary and consensus-driven regulatory initiatives are neither voluntary nor consensus-driven. Big tech is suppressing true information and political speech about COVID-19, mass migration, gender identity under the banner of combating hate speech and disinformation. That's exactly what they're doing in Europe. Tech companies are expected to moderate content from populist rhetoric and anti-elite sentiment, which are two of the same thing, to political satire, meme, soap culture. It's fucking censorship of free speech. And free speech and truthful speech, which they say is hate speech and disinformation. Got to keep going now. I think we're right at an hour. Reuters, donors reluctant to fund U.S.-led Gaza plan as Hamas disarmament push stalls. That's the last of our international news. Well, big surprise, Hamas is not going to disarm. Hamas is not going to give up on what they've been trying to do all along as a militant organization against the state of Israel. They were originally created by Israel, funded by Israel, to suck in all the militants. When Fatah, the PLO became Fatah and disavowed militancy. And so they created a militant organization. They got elected in Gaza, and all the Palestinian militants went to Gaza. And then Benjamin Netanyahu and the left actually got him to do it with his face. It wasn't a fake attack, but it was a constructed attack on October 7th. And then let Benjamin Netanyahu go into Gaza and obliterate them all, which was his plan that was on the shelf. But the left was hoping that it would end him politically. Hasn't really done that, so. But we all know Hamas is a militant organization, so if Hamas gets rid of its militancy, it basically ceases to exist. So why would an organization that is militant stop its militancy? It has no purpose. Anyway, thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Appreciate you joining me today. I'm here live streaming every day, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m., give or take 5 or 10 minutes. And join me every Tuesday night when my friend and I discuss the headlines in the latest installment of Tuesdays with Perry. Episode 154 is up, so check that out. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically, so stay hip to the trick. I'll see you tomorrow. Respect.
This is all a conspiracy. No, you know that it's a conspiracy.
The New World Order.
American, I have rights.